Sunshine Fam. Welcome to my channel today. Yep, this is going to be I don't even remember what I called the last video, but it's going to be a continuation from the last video when I was talking about the presidents. Maybe I called it our early presidents or something. When I talked about our presidents of the Continental Congress, and I told you about the presidents that we've had, that we had in this country prior to George Washington. So I want to start this video out by talking about the role that these presidents had between the Continental Congress and the Confederation Congress. So the president of the Continental Congress from 1774 to 1781 was a provisional moderator guiding a revolutionary body, while the president of the Confederation Congress, 1781 to 1789, was a largely ceremonial head of state with no executive power, functioning as the top diplomat and signer of documents under the Articles of Confederation. Both roles lacked independent authority over the states, but the Confederation position was more defined by its ceremonial nature. So they weren't like the presidents of today. So here's something that I realized after I turned off my camera the last time to upload the video, is that, sorry, had to fix my tripod. The one thing I realized I didn't show you in the last video was the picture of our first president, which was Peyton. What was his last name? Randolph? Peyton Randolph? So let me show you a picture of Peyton Randolph. He was kind of a chubby guy. So here's a picture, sorry, trying to get the glare off of that. So that's Peyton Randolph. He was considered technically our first president prior to George Washington. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue on, and I'm going to start with presidents of the Confederation Congress. So we're going to start with a gentleman by the name of Samuel Huntington. And that's not really a great picture of him. I guess that's the only picture that's a decent picture, I guess. Okay, so that is the picture of Samuel Huntington. So he was the first president of the Confederation Congress. And let me tell you a little bit about him. Let's see, I think I went to Wikipedia for this, right? Okay, so Samuel Huntington was born. Why do I not have that information in here? Here we go. So he was born July 16th of 1731 in Windham, Connecticut, British America, now Scotland, Connecticut. And he died on January 5th, 1796 in Norwich, Connecticut. He was part of the Federalist Party, and his wife's name was Martha Devotion. That's an interesting name. So here is a picture of his, my camera will focus in on the, I don't know if you can see that. His signature is right here, I think. Yeah, there's his signature right there. I don't know how well you can see that, because I've got a lot of glare coming in from my window over there. So that was him. He was preceded, if you remember my last video, by John Jay, who was the 6th president of the Continental Congress. John Jay was also instrumental in our country. Doesn't show that he had any children. So he was succeeded by a gentleman by the name of Thomas McKeon. Here's a picture of him with his son. Looks like he's teaching his son about the new country. So there's Thomas McKeon. Okay. So he was, let me go back a minute here. So Samuel Huntington was in his role as president from September 28th, 1779 to July 10th of 1781. Okay, so now let's go to Thomas, good old Thomas. And he was born March 19th, 1734 in New London Township, Pennsylvania Province, British America. And he died June 24th, 1817 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was also part of the Federalist Party before 1796 and then became a part of the Democratic Republican Party. He had 2 wives, Mary Borden and Sarah Armitage. He has quite an interesting signature. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's his signature. Trying to keep the glare off the camera. So he was So he was in office from July 10th of 1781 through November 4th of 1781. So he didn't serve for very long, only a few months. So so his predecessor or successor was John Hanson. Yep, we're going great. Okay, so this is a picture of John Hanson. He kind of looks a lot like F. Murray Abraham, actually. So here's a picture of him. He looks a lot like F. Murray Abraham, I think. So let's see here. What did I say his name was? John Hanson. Okay, so he was born April 14th of 1721 near Port Tobacco, Maryland, British America, and he died November 15th of 1783 in Oxon Hill, Maryland. He was married to a woman by the name of Jane Conti. He had 8 children, including a son named Alexander. His parents were Samuel Hanson and Elizabeth Story. And he was a merchant politician. So here is his signature. I don't know how well you can see that. I don't know how well the camera's focusing in on that. So that's his signature. And he was in office from November 5th of 1781 to November 3rd of 1782. So he served 1 year. So the next one, I don't know if you pronounce this Elias or Elias. I believe it's pronounced Boudinot, Boudinot. And he looks quite intelligent, I think. A little chunky on the chunky side, but I guess it doesn't matter. So that's him. And let's see, he was born May 2nd, 1740 in Philadelphia, province of Pennsylvania, British America. Died October 24th, 1821 in Burlington, New Jersey. Doesn't show any spouse or children that he had. Doesn't say anything about that. These men's signatures were very, very clean. They're not, definitely not doctor's writing. So here's his signature. Don't know how well you can see that. So that's Elias, and he was in office from November 4th of 1782 to November 2nd of 1783. And after him, we have a gentleman by the name of Thomas Mifflin. Typical looked for that period of time. I wonder if these guys all wore wigs for these portraits. Kind of looks like they do. A lot of the men used to wear that, although this picture doesn't really look like he's wearing a wig. So he was born January 10th of 1744 in Philadelphia, province of Pennsylvania, British America, and died January 20th of 1800 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I know people in Pennsylvania pronounce their is it Pennsylvania? No, it's not in Pennsylvania. Massachusetts, they pronounce their cities very, very strange. Like what looks like Gloucester is Gloucester. Go figure that one. They just have a different language over there, I guess. He was part of the Federalist Party before 1790 and became a Democratic Republican. He was married to a woman named Sarah Morris. His education was the University of Pennsylvania with a BA. His profession was a merchant, soldier, and politician. Now, his signature is a little bit more doctor-like. So that's his signature. I don't know how well you can see that. I don't know if that helps, but so that's his signature. So he was in office from November 3rd of 1783 to June 3rd, 1784. So then we go to a gentleman by the name of Richard Henry Lee. Am I going right? Yeah, Richard Henry Lee. Now I wonder, I'll look this up in a second, but you know, you hear the name Mifflin, and we have a company by the name of, I think it's Dunder Mifflin or Houghton Mifflin, something like that. I wonder if he's part of that Mifflin, part of that, the last guy. Well, this guy looks pretty old in this picture. So Richard Henry Lee, there's not a straight-on shot of him. This is a profile. They all look so serious, don't they? I wonder if they ever had a good time when they were back in the day. So he was born January 20th of 1732 in Stratford Hall, Westmoreland County, Colony of Virginia, British America, and died June 19th of 1794 in Chantilly Plantation, Westmoreland County, Virginia. He was part of the Anti-Administration Party. Never heard of that. He had two spouses, Anne Aylett and Anne Gaskins Pinkard. Pinkard, Pinckard. He had 13 kids, including Thomas and Ludwell. Interesting names. His parents were Thomas Lee and Hannah Harrison Ludwell. He was a lawyer, apparently. And here is his signature, Richard Henry Lee. So I don't know how well the camera's picking it up. The way I'm seeing it, it doesn't look like it's picking it up very well, but maybe it is. So that was his signature. So he was, here we go. He held different, see what happens is they have all these different positions they held, so I got to find the right one for president of the Confederation Congress. So he was in office from November 30th, 1784 to November 4th, 1785. So he was succeeded by John Hancock. Now I know I told you about John Hancock in the last video, so I'm not going to share anything more about him except when he was in office the second time as president of the Continental Congress. So he served in the Continental Congress from November 23rd, 1785 to June 5th of 1787. If you want to know more about him, go back to my last video. But we all know John Hancock because he's famous for his signature. And of course, the building in downtown Chicago, the John Hancock building. Okay, so he's the only guy that we had that served under both the Continental Congress and the Confederate Congress. So he must have been a really good guy. So then we go to Nathaniel Gorham. He's kind of looking off to the side too. Whoever painted his picture made his eyes look weird. Take a look at that. Like one eye is looking straight and the other one is kind of off to the side a little bit. So did he have a lazy eye? I don't know. You notice that like all these old pictures, I don't know if painters back then did not have access to pastel colors or lighter colors, but they're always in drab colors. Like even their clothing was very dark in color. Makes them look very depressed, I guess. So he was born on May 27th of 1738 in Charlestown province of Massachusetts Bay in British America, and he died June 11th, 1796 in Charlestown, Massachusetts. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong because, like I said, Massachusetts has different ways of pronouncing their city names. He was part of the Federalist Party. His wife's name was Rebecca Call. Now here it lists his children's names. It doesn't say how many he had, but let's see. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, it looks like. So we've got Collinsworth Gorham. I'll just say their first names because they're all last names. Their last names are all Gorham. Gorham for the CC person. Collinsworth, Emily, Mary. There were a lot of Marys back in the day too. Elizabeth, Anne, John, Benjamin, Stephen, and Lydia. So Collinsworth, that's an interesting name. Is that like a British name? I wonder. His profession was a politician and a merchant. And his signature is kind of hard to make out a little bit. You got to really look at it very hard to see that it says Nathaniel Gorham. So he was in office from June 6th, 1786 through February 2nd of 1787. Very interesting. So he was succeeded by a gentleman by the name of Arthur St. Clair. Ooh, he looks very angry. Wow, these guys all look very British to me. I'm sure they will. They all have ties to the British, but doesn't he look stern? He looks very stern. And again, in dark clothing. So he was born March 23rd of 1737 in Thurso, Thurso, Caithness, Scotland. Interesting. So I guess back then you didn't have to be born in America to be a president. Died August 31st of 1818 in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. He was part of the Federalist Party. His alma mater was the University of Edinburgh. Edinburgh, CC. Here is his signature. Very fancy signature. I like how he does the underline under his signature. Isn't that kind of cool? Kind of makes it look fancy. So he was in office from February 2nd of 1787 through November 4th of 1787. So he was preceded by a guy named Cyrus Griffin. Now this guy looks like a clown. This guy really looks like a clown. So this is a picture of Cyrus. He kind of looks a little bit like a clown, like the class clown, doesn't he? Almost like he wants to smile, but he's told not to. Kind of looks a little bit like a class clown. So Cyrus was born July 16th of 1748 in Furnham Parish, colony of Virginia, British America. Died December 14th of 1810 in Yorktown, Virginia. His wife's name was Christina Stewart. He had a brother named Samuel. His education was the University of Edinburgh and Middle Temple. I don't know what that is. Here is his signature. I think it's interesting that we can see how these men wrote back in the day. So he was in office from January 2nd, 1788 through November 2nd of 1788. And then the office was abolished until George Washington took office in 1789, which I find interesting. So those were the men that were presidents of the Confederation Congress. Now, as you all know, this year this country is celebrating its 250th birthday from when we became a nation in 1776. But if you think about it, we're also celebrating another anniversary, not nearly as joyous. This year, in September, we will be commemorating 25 years since 9/11. Can you believe it? 25 years. That's crazy. That's really crazy. And it's also going to be the give me a second. '75th anniversary since Pearl Harbor in December. So two other milestone anniversaries. Pretty crazy, I think. So I wonder if they're going to do anything special for 9/11 this year, since it's 25 years. We tend not to remember December 7th, and I don't know why, because there are still men alive that fought during that time. I mean, obviously they'd be in their upper 80s, early 90s, at least, or somewhere, upper 80s to maybe 100 years old or so. There's probably not too many men that are still alive that were part of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But I was going to look something up, wasn't I? But they are still there. And every December, they go out to Pearl Harbor to the USS Arizona Memorial. Now, I've never been to Hawaii, but what I hear is that even all these years later, there is still little bits of oil that are still leaking from the Arizona. Now, I don't know if they have any kind of memorials over the other ships that were sunk that day. I know they have that white building that you have to take a boat to get there, to look like you're standing over the ship of the Arizona. But I don't know if there's any kind of commemoration for any of the other ships that are out there. If you know of any of that information, if you can leave a comment, I'd really appreciate it, so that we could all learn something about that. But yeah, it's going to be quite the year this year. 250 years since the founding of our country in 1776, 75 years since the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, and 25 years since 9/11 happened. And yet people from 9/11 who went there after 9/11, from September 12th onward, to either dig through the pile, they called it, or ground zero, where the buildings fell, to dig people out. They did pull, like, I think 12 or 14 people alive out of the rubble. The movie World Trade Center talks about that, where those two firemen were trapped and they were pulled out alive. But you don't hear about those people that are still suffering, whether they went there to dig through the rubble of the World Trade Centers, or they went there to either feed or clothe or give massages or do whatever to help the people that were digging in the pile. Those people were breathing in asbestos, because if you remember correctly, or for those of you that don't know, the younger generation, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center were built in the 1970s. And back then, asbestos was widely used. So when those towers fell, most of the dust you saw in the aftermath, that gray and white dust, was mostly asbestos. And those people were breathing that in for months. And to this day, people are still suffering from that. I think they call it, there is a name for it. It's a type of cancer. I want to say it's 9/11 cancer or World Trade, WTC disease, or I don't remember what they call it. But, and people today are still dying that had nothing to do with what happened the day of 9/11, but were there after that. And what bothers me is, yes, the majority of the people that died that day were in New York City. But why do we forget about the people who crashed the plane into Pennsylvania? Our American citizens that saved us from another major crash. They can't say exactly where that plane was heading. They were saying either the Capitol or the White House. It crashed in Pennsylvania, so we really don't know where they were going to crash. Or what about the people that died at the Pentagon? Yes, there are memorials in those places, but they're not really the center of attention on 9/11. It's usually New York City, more so than Pennsylvania or Washington, D.C. for the Pentagon. So we have to remember those people too. And we should add to the list the people that died, that have died since September 12th of 2001, that went there to help out, that were breathing in all that asbestos and all that toxic air for all those months. So that's my video for today, I guess. So thank you for joining me for these two videos that I've made that are kind of prequels to my presidential highlights videos. Thank you, C-Dog. This letter C-DAWG. I have to spell that slowly because when I was watching the last video and I put on the closed captioning, they don't spell it right. And Carolyn Levitt is not spelled with a C. It's Karollyn, I think, and Leavitt. Thankfully, we don't have to hear from her for a while. But now it seems like Marco Rubio has taken her place. So, well, she's out on maternity leave. Maybe she won't come back. Wouldn't that be a nice day? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go now. But thank you for joining me. Hope you guys learned a little something about our first presidents prior to George Washington, our first 16 presidents. They obviously didn't serve as long as presidents nowadays do. They obviously had a different role. They didn't have executive power, and they weren't, it doesn't sound like they were really like governing over a body. It sounds like they were just kind of in a leadership role during the Revolutionary War and thereafter. So I wonder, because they're called the Confederation Congress, is that where the Confederate flag came in? And were they part of the Confederate Army during the Civil War? Should I make a video about that? I don't want to keep digging too deep into these rabbit holes. But anyway, hope you guys have a sunny day. Thanks for joining me today, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.